I am so tired of these one-sided, unfair management deals that these artists get tied into for years and years and years. They didn't even know about half of the stuff that's in these contracts that they sign. Guys, we need to go through it. Let's talk about the most important provisions that are going to be in your exclusive management deal so you can stay protected. Hi guys, I'm Miss Krystle. I'm an entertainment attorney. I'm the owner of Dukes Up Records, and most importantly, I'm an independent musician. Make sure you're subscribed and that you turn on your bell notifications so you don't miss these weekly videos to help you with your music career. We're releasing all kinds of videos having to do with marketing, tips and tricks for social media, copyright, trademarks, and everything in between. Now, let's get into the video. Before we get into the literal provisions in the contract that you guys are going to be wanting to look out for, and then also kind of what everything will end up meaning, before we get into any of that, always remember that you can and should try to have a trial period with your potential manager before you sign anything. This is tried and true for every team member that I've personally ever worked with. And if someone's kind of real life and they really believe in you, typically someone's going to be willing to do kind of a trial run. So even if it's 60 days or 90 days, just to give the relationship a try before you actually sign anything. So now you're going to be kind of stuck with someone for a year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever it is. So always have that conversation ahead of time and just see if you can kind of have a courtship before you enter into anything formally with a potential manager. Number one, the first thing that I always look at when I'm reviewing management contracts or when I'm just sitting down with one of my musicians is to talk about, we're super excited, we're about to enter into a new relationship, a new management deal, but more importantly than any of that is, how do you get out of the deal if things go sideways? So we look at the termination provision in the contract. Now, typically there's a section in your contract that is titled termination, and so you can look at that and just to understand, how do you get out of the agreement? Is it for cause, meaning there has to be a specific type of wrongdoing by a certain party for you to be able to get out of the contract, or, and this is really what you want to try to get if possible, is that it's at will, just meaning either party can terminate at any time. Now, in some contracts, I won't even see a termination provision. So then that means we're probably going to be in court arguing over what was the intention of the parties. Can we terminate because there's been some kind of bad act by the manager? These are all things we hopefully don't want to have to deal with, especially when you're talking about going to court because it's so expensive. So make sure you look at what the termination provision is in your management contract, and if possible, try to have it so that either party can mutually terminate at any time. Number two, term of the contract. When we say the term of the contract, we're saying how long does the contract go for? The reason this is important is, especially if there wasn't a solid termination clause in your agreement, and now maybe things aren't just going well with the manager. Not that anything really awful happens, but you just want to get out of this relationship as soon as possible. Well, now, because you didn't have a termination right ahead of time, you have to wait till the natural expiration of the contract. So you have to calendar, when does the contract start and how long does it go for? So if you're stuck in it for 3 years, maybe 2 years, that can be a really long time. So what you want to do is try to negotiate down for as short amount of time as possible. I always say, let's do 1 year, if not less, if not 6 months or 9 months, but it's typically going to land around a year because equally, the manager's going to have to invest in you and probably put in time and money. And so they want to see the fruits of their investment. So they want to go for as long as possible. And that makes sense. So we try to find a happy medium between the two. Now, in some situations, we can get a little bit longer if it's a heavy hitter manager who's the real life representing some of the biggest acts. And so they'll come back and they'll ask for a little bit longer, let's say 2 years. And look, I mean, some of these guys don't even ask for contracts. They still do it, you know, as an oral agreement, that kind of thing. But for those who are a little more real life and want to have everything down on a piece of paper, that's really good. It protects the manager and it protects you. But again, the rule of thumb is always try to get the term to as short as possible. Number three, commission for the manager. So when we say the commission, we're talking about how much does the manager make from your earnings. Now, remember that the manager is typically going to ask for almost any and all revenue from your entertainment career, because equally, if the manager was able to get you even an acting gig or some sponsorship or something that wasn't necessarily related to music, they're going to want to rip from that. So sometimes there'll be exclusions, and so there'll be certain things that the manager can't take from, but trust me, the manager's going to try and get it from everything if at all possible. So what does that look like? It's typically around 15 to 20%, and that's going to be from gross revenue. Now, the reason I want to emphasize this is because of the definition of gross versus net, but let me talk about the actual percentage first. If it's a new or newer kind of manager, or maybe they don't really have a lot of contacts to really get things started, but they have the passion, they believe in you, great. Well, you still want to negotiate a lower percentage for the manager. In that kind of situation, I would say 15% and maybe even less. Industry standard is 15 to 20, but in some situations, if it's mom or just someone who's just trying to help you, well, they don't want to take too much from your earnings. So we might even get down to 10%. Now, for a more real life, kind of heavy hitter manager, like I had mentioned, they're going to want 20%. So again, this is the swinging scale of they want to get as much as possible because they're investing in you. So kind of weigh the scales of who this person is, what kind of connections that they have, and then you can agree on a percentage based on all of those factors. Now, the other item that I just briefly mentioned was net versus gross. Now, in almost all management deals, it's going to be from gross, which means gross is everything that comes in from your music career. So it's all inclusive of all earnings. Net is when you take expenses and it's what's left over. It's after you've paid for your tour expenses and your merchandise and your studio time. So while you made all this money, you still had to pay for X, Y, Z and everything in between. So you're only left with a certain amount. Now, something that my office has been doing recently is trying to always negotiate so that it is net, because a lot of our musicians are independent. And so you're having to pay for a lot. So it makes a big difference if the manager is taking from all revenue coming in versus what was actually left. So if at all possible, try to negotiate that. And if you can get net for the manager's commission, that'll be a pretty big win. Number 4, the sunset clause. Now, this might be called something else in your agreement, but basically a sunset clause is what the manager gets paid after your contract terminates. Whether that's because of early termination, whether that's because the contract naturally expired, meaning it ran its 1 year or 2 years, whatever it was. Now, with a sunset clause, what it does is it's good for managers because if they invested in you and they put in like 3 years of work, you're doing really well now and you've decided to move on to someone else. Fair, right? Well, nonetheless, the manager wants to still take a little extra revenue for the following period of time because of their investment. And so, of course, the manager is going to try and negotiate this for as long as possible for the highest percentage. And so let's say that you had signed a deal and it was 15 or 20%, and the deal ended up being for 2 years or 3 years. Well, the manager is going to try and get, let's say, 5 to 10%, more like 10% in most cases, but they'll try to get their 10% for the following 6 months or a year, and then it keeps tapering down after that. So then the following period of time, it goes less, and maybe it's down to 5, and then it'll go down to 2.5, and then it'll be 1%. And so basically, they're little drop downs in the payments that go to the manager. So what you need to think about as the artist, or even through your own attorney, is what percentage is going to be fair based on the investment of time that the manager put in. So when I draft these, what I try to do is just to say, based on when the contract is terminated, then that affects how long that the manager can take a rip from your earnings. I had a situation where one of my clients had signed with a manager and the manager only ended up representing them for 6 months, and yet the sunset clause was going to be for 1.5 years. Well, that seems kind of unreasonable on its face. Why would the manager be making for 1.5 years having only represented for 6 months? So these are the kinds of things that you need to think about in practical effect. Be fair. You know, you want to make sure you build goodwill with your potential new manager, but always try to negotiate it down so it's as short as possible and as low a percentage as is reasonable for that particular situation. Number 5, manager expenses. Make sure that there's a provision in your contract that talks about how much is the manager allowed to incur on your behalf that now you need to reimburse. This is a big deal for a lot of my independent musicians because they don't want to have to be reimbursing $500 a week for their manager when they're not even making that much from, let's say, their merch or their music sales. And so if you have it specified, understanding that the manager is going to need to incur some expenses and reasonably they should get reimbursed because it was done on your behalf, but be very clear. So if it's $250 a month or $250 a week, make sure it's in your contract so it's very, very clear and there's no confusion or upset because there was too much money spent or it wasn't discussed ahead of time. Number 6, take your contract to an entertainment attorney. not just any attorney, an entertainment attorney with experience specifically with these kinds of contracts and these types of deals. This is not only going to give you peace of mind as far as knowing that the terms were reviewed by a professional, but it's going to save you time and money down the road. Now, just as a quick side note, I did release a video about how to select the right entertainment attorney for you. You can click that here. Make sure you watch that and so you are able to find the right fit for you. But when you take your management contract to someone who is professional and in this particular region, they're going to find stuff that you missed ahead of time. And so it's going to end up saving you, like I said, time, money, effort, headaches, tears. So just do it. So that's your quick overview of the most important provisions in your management agreement. And if you need to rewatch this, take notes, please do. When you have your contract in front of you, pause it. And when I say look at the termination provision, go to the termination provision in your contract. Really take the time to understand this stuff, because this isn't the first time that you're going to see a management contract or get an offer from someone who wants to help you. So get experience with this. I am very serious when I say always take your contracts to an entertainment attorney and someone who is experienced in this type of law and these types of deals, but there's no reason that you guys shouldn't be learning about this stuff as you go along. I was very, very experienced with these types of contracts in general before I went to law school, because I had just decided that I will never let someone take advantage of me. I should know this stuff. And so that's the kind of thing that I want to instill in my artists as well. With that all being said, I'm going to get out of here. Thank you very much for your time watching this video. If you haven't already subscribed, please do that, and be sure to turn on your bell notifications so you don't miss your favorite redhead giving you some tips and advice and things like that. And be sure to come say hi on social media. Instagram, Facebook, it's all the same, and tag Miss Krystle live. I'm posting usually about once a day at this point. I love hearing from you guys, and I've been meeting so many new people who are finding these videos and finding them helpful, and it's just nice to be able to grow a community, because for so long, I didn't feel like I was getting the help that I needed. It was so frustrating, and so that's why I'm doing these videos. It's just to offer a little bit of help. So with that all being said, I'm gonna get out of here. I'm Miss Krystle, and I'll see you on the next one.